start. We're quite, the time is quite advanced already, so it's better to get to our plenary now, as we are planning to finish really at 8 or short before better, so that everybody is enabled to go to the party event. Could I ask for your attention? Thank you. I think that still people will get in, but it's better to start off the plenary session on digital rights, defining digital ecology in the wake of ACTA. We had planned to have an introductory keynote speech by Eva Lichtenberger, who is a member of the European Parliament, so a colleague of mine, sharing with me together the Internet Core Group in the European Parliament's Green Group, but she is unfortunately not able to come because she's sick. As we are already advanced, I will not ask someone to replace her, but we will just directly go into the plenary debate. We have three very good and helpful guests here on our side. I start right on the left from me. There's Christiana Mauro. She's legal advocate of the Arbeitskreis Vorratsdatenspeicherung in Germany. And then we have next to me Benjamin Sontag, who is a co-founder of La Quadrature du Net in France. And we have on my right side Walter van Holst, the Vice President of the European Digital Rights Initiative. Is it wrong? No, not longer, but so the former Vice President of the European Digital Rights Initiative, so Idri, he's from Netherlands. And I thank you very much for coming here, debating with us the topic of digital rights. And before I start with the debate, I would like to ask for your attention once more, because it's quite noisy still. And I would like to give full attention to our guests. The title, Defining Digital Ecology in the Wake of ACTA, says, of course, that there has been a moment of huge awareness on the digital rights, on the topic of digital rights. In summer this year, the European Parliament rejected the so-called ACTA agreement. Not all people knew what's exactly in this international trade agreement, but the agreement draw the attention when it draws the attention to the question of how to enforce intellectual property rights, because that was one objective of that agreement, and especially how to deal with this interest in the digital environment and how this is connected to the rights, the individual rights of users, of citizens, of customers, and also, of course, the question how the legal framework in the digital environment should look like. What is the digital age putting as challenge towards the policymakers, to us all as society, when it comes to our rules, our society, how we want to live, due to the digital age. And it was not just a short moment in which this appeared, but it was a moment which finished a long debate, because this debate started already years ago on not only the ACTA agreement, but generally on the question how individual rights can be protected in the digital environment, and how, of course, rights, legitimate rights or non-legitimate rights, or also law can be enforced in the digital environment, or also in the digitalized, globalized world which we have today. And in this whole story we had developments like when it comes to software patents, where the European Parliament already said once no to a proposal, that was in 2004. And also where the European Parliament discussed very much the question of digital rights and freedom of of knowledge also, and the question of how patents should be drawn, how creativity should be protected also. And then we had another important debate, which was on the telecoms package, the so-called telecoms package. Some directives on the question how audiovisual media and digital media are regulated, and where the European Parliament asked for rules on rule of law, basically, in the internet environment and in the digital environment. So, in which should be the procedure when law enforcement is taking place in the digital environment, which until now is not really decided, or was not really decided and created by democratic states or by decision-making processes which were very public, but mainly drawn by private entities, by access providers, and by companies who just enforced their rules and just agreed with the customers on common rules without having really a basic law for that. So that's what we want to debate with you today. I used some 4 or 5 minutes for introduction, and now I would like to start off and perhaps start with Benjamin, if you would like to, with your view, because I think when I got sorry for a bit introduction, I would like to say, when I get into all this software patents, telecoms package, and so on, and I was active in the Young Greens many years on that, and then that already was some years, and then I got into the European Parliament, and the telecoms package just got into the last phase of debate and negotiations. In all these times, the first time I really saw people very active and engaged on the European level, that was led by La Quadrature du Net. And so you were one of the first who really founded something which was active on the European level. And I would like to know, how's your experience since the foundation of La Quadrature du Net, and what you think are the challenges also to come for the future?
Okay, thank you, Jan. Yeah, so La Quadrature du Net was effectively created in 2008 because we had that street strike law starting in France against sharing of culture and so on, and peer-to-peer and others. And we also had the telecom package at that time were about to be voted. And the 4 co-founders of La Quadrature, we were at the software patents battle. We called it a battle because it even finished with a navy battle in the river near the European Parliament in Brussels. And we were fighting for those digital rights for years. And when we created La Quadrature du Net, we say, okay, we need to be more structured to help the MEPs be able to understand more precisely what those digital topics and how important they are as of today. And we also wanted to be able to empower citizens. Our main way of working is to create tools. We are what we call a citizen toolbox. It means we try to explain the citizens of Europe and in France, more precisely, the threats and on fundamental freedoms and on the digital rights in the 21st century. And so, thanks to this, citizens can participate in public debates. For example, we don't send hundreds of phone calls to MEPs. We just we just explain to thousands of citizens how important it is, so that those citizens will call their MEP. And for us, it makes a big difference. So that's our main action. We are a toolbox to empower citizens, and so that they understand those topics. So our main action is to defend the fundamental rights on the internet, and the sharing of knowledge, of course, and culture, and the fight against censorship, and also the copyright issues, because we started on the street strike issue in France in 2008. And so ACTA, yes, ACTA was, the first time we talked about it, it was, I remember the exact date now, it's on July 2008. We posted a first paper saying, oh, this trade agreement could be dangerous. At that time we didn't know exactly what it would be, but we found many places inside the text we could find, and oh yeah, nobody could find that text because it was secretly negotiated, and that was a crucial point in our opinion at the time. How can an international trade agreement be negotiated behind closed door in total secret? That should not happen. And so we had the chance to have a leak from WikiLeaks at that time of the currently negotiating text. Then later we leaked another version of the text during the negotiation process. And during those 4 years, we analyzed, each time we had that text, we analyzed the link between some articles. And we found very disturbing issues on digital rights. Precisely the fact that they want to make the internet service provider responsible on the content of the data flowing through their pipes, for example. We also exposed some issues with seeds and medicines and so on. So we even collaborate with other NGOs on those topics, because it was not really digital topics. And so our aim during the ACTA battle was to create a political momentum so that it costs too much to vote for that treaty, for that trade agreement. And as far as I can see, for 478 against and 39 MEPs for ACTA, well, it's quite a victory. And as far as I remember, there is not 478 Greens at the parliament. So this topic was totally cross groups. We had MEPs from all political groups voting against ACTA. And why? Because the citizens called that. And for example, we had a tool, we have a tool called the iPhone, where we can enter MEPs or a list of persons with their phone number, so that citizens of all Europe can call them and know who to call, who they're gonna call, and they don't have to find their MEPs or find a phone number or find in which group they are working. So it makes far easier for citizens to call them, and it's even free because we pay for the telecommunication. So if you're in Lithuania or in a country where the phone call could be expensive for Brussels, use the iPhone. And that's an example of how we can empower citizens with our analysis and with our tools. And okay, ACTA is dead, but it's not the first time we fight against something in Europe or in France. And in fact, it's endless. It's what we call the endless war on sharing. War against sharing, by the way. And that's the main topic for the Quadrature as of today. We think that that war against sharing should stop, because there is the cultural practice of today. They are based on sharing, on remix, on copy and paste. It's not just the funny cats video on YouTube. It's more than that. There is a French expression, I don't know how to spell it in English, which is we are nous sommes sur les épaules des géants. We are always yeah, we are on the shoulder of giants. Thank you. And it's so real today on the culture world. So we can't separate remix from freedom of speech anymore. And so as of today, the Quadrature started with other NGOs in Europe a proposal, what we call the Action Plan for Cultural Reform and Culture in the 21st Century. If you're interested, I can give you the URL when you can find it. It's currently discussed by those NGOs as of today. It's what we call the positive agenda also. And in that proposal, we ask for example, for the legalization of non-profits sharing of culture between individuals, between citizens, because it has no reason, no valuable reason to be forbidden. What we call technically the peer-to-peer is the best example of that. When we were at school, we already exchanged audio cassettes, and then CDs, and so it's not different at all from what we did decades ago. So that's the fight, the current fight of La Quadrature. We're also involved in more French topics, such at that time, and also on what we call the network neutrality, which is another topic that comes again and again and again. And there has been many questions from the European Commission about that, but no action whatsoever as of now. So we hope there will be also something done on that direction. So, thank you.
Thank you, Benjamin. I think we will get back to the topic of net neutrality perhaps in the ongoing debate. But at this point, I would like to also walk a step on the different perspectives of digital rights, because talking about ACTA and about the telecoms package, this is about law enforcement in the digital society or environment. The question in how far, as you said, access providers are being made responsible for the information which they just transfer, and therefore also being put into the situation that they perhaps could censorship what the citizens do, or that they could also be non-neutral. That's about net neutrality. But there's also another side of all this, which is about the question, if you really want to enforce everything in the digital environment, you of course need a huge amount of personal data, because you need to know who's doing what all the time. And that's what also has been a huge debate on the European level. And I remember that me personally, I was a trainee in the European Parliament's Green Group, 2005-2006, and at exactly that time, in the European Parliament, there was the directive on data retention passed, and this, of course, is linked to the digital environment very much, because it's not only about phone calls and telecommunications data in the analog world being surveyed, but also our access to the internet and all the information about our communication in the digital environment. And of course it's about a huge amount of personal data, and data protection is a very important question which we have to deal with and I would like to give the question to Christiane, because you are from the AK-Vorratsdatenspeicherung, which means a working group on data retention, which was founded exactly at that time because of the data retention directive. And I was very much engaged also, or I was very much impressed of the work of this group during the recent years, which was also linked to the case in front of the German Constitutional Court, who brought or who dismissed the proposal on the data retention law in Germany. I would like to know, how do you see the developments regard to this directive and to the data retention issue, and of course how do you see the interconnection between what Benjamin says and the field of data protection in Europe?
Thank you. And thank you for inviting me here today. I want to first congratulate you all for your tremendous efforts in defeating ACTA and blocking legislation as well. And we're very appreciative of all your efforts. And I also just want to mention that on my flight on the way here from Munich, I happened to sit beside DG Industry from the a commissioner who was in charge of, who was the principal scientific officer for security research and development. So we got into a conversation and about striking the right balance between fundamental rights and security, and as you can imagine, we didn't agree on very much. But what we did agree on was that he mentioned over the course of this discussion that he believes that the Greens were the only party in the Parliament that found creative solutions, that were looking for creative and feasible solutions to problems. And he didn't know that I was coming to the Greens today, so incidentally, I just wanted to mention that. He was very impressed. So the German Working Party on Data Retention is a coalition of NGOs and individuals and some journalists but essentially privacy advocates who object to the notion of blanket data retention. And as Jan already mentioned, the Constitutional Court case was the first, actually the biggest, largest number of constitutional complainants in the history of Germany. So I think it was 34,000, 35,000. And so that was really quite a big success, which got quite a lot of attention in Germany. As it happens in most other countries in Europe, there are very, very few people who have even heard of this particular directive. So I'll just describe it as briefly as I can. The directive obliges all service providers and providers of publicly available electronic communications data to retain all traffic data and location data from 6 months to up to 2 years for the purpose of investigating and prosecuting serious crime. So in other words, it calls for the storage of telephone and internet information, such as names, addresses, and communicating parties, who you're speaking to, when, and a few other things. It also, by implication, includes all of the websites that you go to as well. So all of this very personal information is stored for a certain amount of time. It was adopted in the first pillar in 2006, right after the Madrid and London bombings. And so the first pillar, as you know, it has to do with regulating the internal market. But it was all, at the same time, it was sold as a measure to facilitate criminal investigations. So already there's a little bit of there are quite a few problems about the way in which it was adopted, the democratic process, or lack thereof. In fact, the European Data Protection Supervisor, just while criticizing the directive for a few years, suddenly, just before it was adopted, suddenly decided mysteriously to endorse it for reasons I still don't understand, even though pretty much all of society was in agreement that it was excessive and possibly unnecessary. But at the same time, when you hear the name, it seems doesn't sound like a very threatening thing. It seems reasonable, because for criminal investigations, it makes sense that you need to log IP addresses and contact details of possible criminals. And so why has this directive, for the people who have heard of it, among the people who have heard of it, why has it been called the most privacy-invasive instrument adopted in the EU, and the most, by others, it's been called the most controversial European surveillance instruments, and also been referred to as the brutal paradigm shift in civil liberties? The reason is that it constitutes blanket communications of data retention. So whereas previously people were only monitored and their data was held if they were under concrete suspicion of a crime, now all of the communications and locations and data of all Europeans are stored, and whenever you store and collect data, especially when it's personal data, there's always a great risk of that data being misused and abused. There have been many problems related to the legality of the directive on many different levels, but essentially it comes down to whether it's necessary, whether it's a suitable measure, whether it's proportional, and whether it's constitutional. But these are pretty big issues. And it's important to point out that instead of harmonizing the internal market, which was its purported purpose, it's actually ended up doing quite the opposite. So there's more disparity in terms of member state legislation now than there had been before the adoption of the directive. And yeah, many people that are critical suggest that it doesn't even come close to striking a balance between privacy and security. And right now it's undergoing an evaluation which was supposed to have been completed, I think, in September of 2010, according to an article within the directive. But the Commission had a great deal of trouble obtaining statistics from all the member states on how many requests there were for data and how it was used. And as a result, not even half of the member states supplied reasonable amount of data. And so they have very little to base their evaluation on. But what is a little bit disturbing in all of this is that despite that, it appears that the decision about how the evaluation would be concluded was decided long before the investigation even began. I know that months before it officially began, Commissioner Malmström publicly said that the data retention directive is here to stay, and even in the questionnaires that were sent out to the member states asking for statistics, they were looking only at how well, they would presume the value of the directive, of the measure, and were only looking for examples of how it had helped law enforcement, and not interested in comparing, for example, member states that had not implemented the directive to see whether there was actually a difference in the crime clearance rates. And I could go on about, there's a lot of problems with the whole evaluation process, again, from a democratic point of view and transparency. Just recently, the Akavrat made a Freedom of Information request to try and look at the documents, all of the reports and evaluations that have been taking place for the last 2 years. And we just received about 26 pages out of 800. And I assume there's going to be a little article published about this, the summary of the data that we received. But again, one of the most disturbing things is that it seems that all of the suggestions and quite serious criticisms about the legality of the measure and necessity of the measure appear to have been completely ignored in the most recent report of the Commission. So I think we'll stop there and let you.
Thank you, Christiana. I think that we have heard already quite much about different proposals, different fields of digital rights development, and I think it's very obvious all of them are quite European issues. So we have them European-wide, and coming to you, Walter. You're a member of IDRI, and you have been also at the board of IDRI and working there still. IDRI, the European Digital Rights Initiative, was also founded because of these things, very much digital rights issues, very much being European, and the idea behind that was to bring together activist groups and work on these issues. Having said or having heard what's all on the table to discuss, there's quite a huge development which we had throughout the last 10 years, around 10 years now. And now we have, that's what I'm working on at the moment, the data protection regulation on the table, so it becomes even more European as it is one legal instrument than on data protection. How do you see the environment or the public awareness for all these European things? Has it changed throughout the 10 years, and how do you see the chances of really getting into a European-wide debate on issues which are linked to the digital age and on all the topics like data protection, creation, innovation, and net neutrality also? How do you think this can work, and do you see changes also throughout the last years, and now at least at the last point also with the vote on ACTA in the European Parliament?
Thank you. Indeed, the world has been changing. Thank you for the invitation, by the way. EDRI currently has 32 member groups. We're kind of a pan-European association of civil rights groups. And we have 32 members. I'm not counting observers. AK Voorraad and La Quadrature will have observer status at EDRI because we only accept legal entities as members. Those members are in 20 different countries, not necessarily all EU members. We consider Europe as the Europe of the Council of Europe. For example, we also have Macedonian members. We even have
That's the same for the European Green Card.
Okay, well, then there's another fit. We actually have too many fits, I'm sometimes afraid. And EDRI was founded about 10 years ago. It was kind of already recognized back then with the back then very small groups. The Chaos Computer Club in Germany was a big founder, was already big at the time. It was founded together with Bits of Freedom in the Netherlands and Vibe IT in Austria, I think, and I'm probably forgetting several other fathers of this lovely child. We do currently have a permanent office in Brussels with Joe McNamee as the director and the wonderful and great Kristen Fiedler and Marie Mo as other permanent employees, and we also enjoy having several interns around all the time. And it's also kind of illustrative. We didn't have a permanent presence in Brussels until about 5 years ago. And by the time EDRI was founded, it was kind of, digital rights was kind of the area of this scruffy, bearded man with ponytails and pizza-stained black t-shirts, if I'm allowed to stereotype this. And nowadays it's becoming overwhelmingly clear that these are mainstream issues. The best illustration, after all, are the demonstrations in Poland against ACTA. Tens of thousands of people were, despite it being wintertime in Poland, were demonstrating in the streets of Poland. And I will get back a bit later on those issues. If you take a step backwards and talk about formulating a positive agenda on digital rights, I would like to suggest to also consider not looking at digital rights as something for the digital environment, because there's no longer such a thing as the digital environment. The digital environment is becoming everywhere. To give a few examples, earlier these 2 days, sustainable development has been discussed. Well, then you all of a sudden end up in discussions about smart grids. Well, smart grids are interesting because they may allow us to use energy in a much more sustainable way. Smart grids also involve smart metering. And now all of a sudden you bump into all interesting sorts of privacy issues. For example, there was a pilot in Germany with smart electricity metering, in which the interval between which the usage per household was measured was less than a minute. And that allowed a bunch of researchers to correlate television programs with electricity consumption. So based on the data provided by the smart meters, it could be discerned with a reasonable amount of accuracy, over 90%, what television program was being watched in that particular household at a given time. And then the circle comes back. We're talking about sustainable development, and digital technology allows us for great opportunities in that area, but there's also a downside risk there, in this particular case, privacy. To give another example, again in the area of green development, we need more innovation in the field. And that innovation is being stifled by so-called intellectual property rights, such as copyrights and patents. If I were, for example, to develop a new smartphone for whatever, let's say that's for an interesting, again, energy consumption application, the average smartphone is covered with tens of thousands of patents. That's not an environment in which a starting entrepreneur can enter that particular market, although the technology in smartphones itself is no longer that cutting edge anymore. So these are just 2 examples where I think looking at digital rights as a dossier on its own is not productive. I think about any policy area on which the Greens are interested in does have digital dimensions, and it takes a comprehensive look at everything involved to actually defend the values the Greens are standing for. Another thing I would like to raise is that it's probably not productive either to separate subjects that are very much entangled. And to give you another example, and I'm asking for a raise of hands. Who here owns a tablet, e-reader, a mobile device on which he or she reads books online, e-books online? Okay, that's roughly 25% in this group. If you look at the terms and conditions of most popular e-readers, such as the Amazon's Kindle, the Kobo, and all that, most of them contain provisions that they will collect and use your reading habits to improve the service. And this means, first of all, a privacy issue. Secondly, it also means that your freedom of information becomes into danger. For example, if you happen to be very much interested in the Quran, now you will end up in a database saying that you have been very much interested in the Quran. I don't think I need to explain why that particular piece of data may be becoming worrisome. And this goes to the extent that technically it's possible to look what pages in a particular book you've been dwelt most on. And maybe it turns out to be embarrassing that you have your e-reader mostly to read Harry Potter instead of the collected works of Foucault. That's not as dangerous currently, but again, the Quran example is otherwise. May I have another raise of hands? How many people here have a Facebook account? That's the vast majority. Do you realize that by the mere coincidence that most web pages nowadays do have this lovely little like button on it, and you having a Facebook account that allows Facebook to correlate whatever web page you visit, whether you're either logged in or logged out of your Facebook account. So, Christina mentioned that our lovely governments are collecting basically almost every move you make and every phone call you make.